Like and subscribe right now, or else this will be in your bed tonight. r/AskReddit by Reddit Universe. Engineers of Reddit. What's something that's designed into a machine solely because of the stupidity of human beings? I used to work in a building where the air ducts and air diffusers were originally designed to be almost completely silent. Well, apparently when the building opened, a lot of tenants complained that the air wasn't working. While it was working fine, they couldn't hear it and assumed it wasn't running. The building ended up putting these sound boxes in the ceiling near every diffuser to simulate the sound of air blowing. Could have saved money by just tying some ribbon or something to the vents. Get this man a job. I could use a new one. A little less soul crushing, please. Putting barriers at railroad crossings that block the whole road and not just the directional lane. Because even with lights flashing and barriers down, people still think they can drive around the gates and beat the train. I've been on scene for some pretty nasty cleanups. Because people didn't want to wait an extra 5 minutes for a train to pass. People still think they can drive around the gates and beat the train. I could have made it if you hadn't made me slow down to get around these barriers. My sister is a paramedic. She once got to a Blackfriars train station worker. Because they were too lazy to go down in the long way to their rest place when having lunch, they instead used to use some ladder to just go over a train. Well, one day there was too much air humidity and thus the high voltage cable above the train decided, let's shoot a lightning 1 meter into that guy. She said the guy was most likely instantly dead and wasn't even really discernible to be human anymore. In one of my electrical safety classes we were shown a video of someone in India, I think. This guy was goofing around and climbed up on top of a stationary train to show off. Well, he gets up there and just nonchalantly reaches up and grabs a cable that was running above the train. The high voltage cable that powers the train. Instant death. His whole body catches fire. His charred corpse finally lets go of the cable after a little while and he falls from the train. Electricity ain't no joke. The reason an ATM gives you your card back before your cash is because you just grab the cash and forget your card. Silly humans. I was in a foreign country where the ATM gave you your cash before your card and walked away without my debit card. In my defense, I had been drinking a bit that night. But apparently if you leave your card in the machine it will get sucked in and stored internally. Thankfully I was able to get it back when the bank opened the next day. But yeah, people like me are the reason for that. Same thing happened to my uncle, but the card was shredded and he was sober. Jokes on them. I once took my card and left without taking the money I had just withdrawn. Half of mechanical engineering design is trying to figure out how the end users are going to misuse a mechanism and either hurt themselves or break something. I seriously can't think of any mechanism that doesn't have some kind of anti-idiot thought put into it. I had a professor in one of my classes say if it can possibly be used as a hammer, someone somehow will use it as one. This is why so many things are so bulky and reinforced past what the normal accidental dropping use factor of safety is. Saw a student use a micrometer as a clamp one time. Caterpillar has people in the proving grounds that spend all day using machinery incorrectly then give it back, see what kind of damage they caused. It's amazing what people can do with a skid steer up on 2 wheels. It's not a machine, but the progress bars in TurboTax are a sham. Computers are fast, and the calculations aren't that hard. Whenever it says calculating, that's just to make the humans feel like they got their money's worth. That reminds me of the time Michael Scott went to see an accountant about his Michael Scott Paper Company business and demanded he crunch the numbers again. It's a spreadsheet, so just do it. Click, you're still losing money. Taps, crunch. Sorry, Michael. If you work in an office, chances are you have an IP desk phone, the ones that use a network cable. Now if you pick it up you will hear a dial tone or some other white noise. That's completely artificial. It's just an audio file the phone goes out of its way to play for you. Why? Normally the phones are silent, but the first company that popularized them, I think it was Cisco, kept getting complaints that the phones were broken because there was no dial tone. So they just slapped some white noise on the phones, and people stopped complaining. I forgot about this, but yes, very true. A lot of things related to computers are Because people don't believe it's doing something if they can't see, hear it. Also, Google is known for doing this too. When Google was being developed, it was very minimalist design, being free of flashy pop-ups and distracting animations. The clean and fresh look. Also, the programmers didn't know CSS too well. During the test phase, people would just stare at the screen and not use the site. When asked why, they replied, "I don't think it's finished loading." So the devs added a big colorful Google and some copyright info. Well, to be fair, this was during dial-up era and that shit, not fully loaded pages after quite a while, happened all the time. It'd load part, wait forever, load the rest. The entire field of UI, UX design revolves around pleasing the stupid while not annoying the intelligent. A great designer once told me, never assume your users are stupid, but never forget that they are. You can't make something idiot-proof, because God is a better designer than you are and he designs the idiots. A common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. Douglas Adams in Mostly Harmless. Power paper cutters require that the human operator simultaneously push 2 buttons. This is to prevent the accidental amputation of the operator's hand. I did a small work study in high school at a printing shop. The power of those machines amazed me. It was like no other cutter I've ever seen before. It would easily slice through a hand. If I remember correctly, there was a pedal at the bottom that had to be pressed as well to keep your foot away from the blade. Never underestimate humans, I guess. When I was in college, we had a cold roll mill. Basically 2 rollers designed to roll metal thin. Incredibly powerful. During the training, it was explained the position of the emergency stop button was such that if you got your hand caught in it, your head would hit the e-stop before it pulled you in completely and rolled you down to about 1/8 inches thick. Sure, your arm would be 1/8 inches thick, but at least it's just that. Story time, kids. When I was 18, I was operating a large roll forming machine and had my gloved hand pulled into said machine. I was feeding metal into the machine and my glove caught on the metal. The controls for the machine were on the left end, which, as I discovered, was in just the right place for me to slam my body into the control box, hitting the large red, protruding more than any other thing on the box, button. The machine stopped before reaching my elbow. This simple design feature saved, I believe, my arm. As it is, I have all my fingers and full strength and mobility. Only some rather large scars remain as a testament to the event. I think it's not just due to stupidity, but once you operate such machine for several years, the chance of making mistake adds up. People make mistakes, trip, have hangover, get accidentally too close, etc. There's also the comfort effect where people get so used to operating dangerous machinery that they don't have that extra bit of care a newbie would have. Not an engineer, but a millwright and work around industrial equipment daily. Most e-stops on large machines won't save you. They're so large and asking them to stop on a dime ain't gonna happen. About the dumbest guard I've ever had to make is on a roll stamp machine. It's more or less a hydraulic press that puts part numbers in round objects via pressure. You put the part in, line it up and have to hit 2 buttons a few feet apart, and that's a safety on its own. We had a guy who would kinda toss one of the parts in the holder and hope it was in the right spot when he hit the button. If it wasn't, the machine wouldn't work. Dude must have got tires of having to move the part around and figures I could save time and bump the part with my nose rather than use my hands. He did, apparently for a year or so. One day he hits the buttons with his nose on the part. The press comes down and gets the tip of his nose. He freaks out and lets go of the buttons, and that stopped the machine with him stuck in it. One of the joys of maintenance is you gotta be the guy to get the other guy out of the machine, and because of that a ton of first responder training is necessary for the job. I give him the once over, make sure he didn't get his head or neck pulled in, and cut up an oxygen mask and more or less taped it to his mouth so he could get air while someone calls the fire department. The FD shows up and asks if I can get him out, because I know my way around the machines, and I go get my toolbox. Unfortunately, the bolts I needed access to were blocked by his body, and the jaws of life won't touch hardened steel, so our options were limited. The press is on a ratchet system so it doesn't throw a part of a hydraulic line blows, and luckily for the guy stuck, the ratchet was just on a new tooth, meaning it had to go down further to be released. I informed the fire department it will have to move another 1/4 inch down so the press head would go back up. We finally say frick it, he ain't gonna die so we'll just run it down and get it over with. The paramedics load him up with Dilaudid and we try to go down only to find that dumbass who is stuck kicked the wiring for the hydraulic valve and broke it. I had to splice some wiring right at his dong level and he's an incredibly obese Iowan so the smells were interesting. I fix the wiring and drop the press down. It releases and he pops up looking like Rudolph the obese Iowan. Once he came back to work I made his ass repeat what he did on a locked out machine so I could make guarding for it and was impressed by his stupidity. I painted it his favorite color. He still works there and is as dumb as a freaking pancake, but he has heart lol. Nice guy, just eats paint chips. Nice guy, just eats paint chips. My sides. If someone who makes Coke freestyle machines is reading this, you haven't worked hard enough. You'll be amazed at how many people cannot figure out how to get soda out of this giant glorified printer. The guy who helped invent those was Dean Kamen, and they were actually made as a trade-off with Coke, so they would help fund his other invention that is used to provide clean water in third world countries. Though they kinda suck, they had to be cheap enough for Coke to want them in businesses. Good old Dean. Inventing cybernetics, the segue, inspiring STEM through first, providing clean water and giving us the freestyle machine. Coke actually records usage data from these. They have a modem and cell antenna that send all usage data to Coke each night. If you see parts made out of brass, 9 times out of 10, it's designed to be broken. Basically, when something fricks up, instead of having something expensive break, they put that into break first. Also, the power plugs on a PlayStation. Kudos to Sony. Nobody is going to frick that up. For a similar reason, HDMI and DVI cables are made quite weak intentionally, so when you trip over them you break the cable and not the port on the expensive electronics on either end. USB cables, too. I've gone through like 6 on my portable hard drive, and the drive is still kicking, along with all the USB ports on my laptop. Jesus freaking Christ, treat your cables with respect. Automated machines in pretty much every factory have redundant kill switches in the form of pressure sensitive mats, light walls, essentially the mechanism that makes your garage door reverse and raise when you break the beam, etc. All because people have and will mindlessly walk into a moving robot machine and lose at least a limb. I work with such a robot. The big arms can get going up around 15-20 km/h with velocity spikes up to 30-40 km/h during combined movement. It's not when it's moving correctly that you're guarding against, it's when things go wrong, since the safety switches are generally much more procedurally robust, since false positives on tripping them are desired rather than to be avoided. You work with a big robot with spinning spikes on its arms? Should I PM my resume or is there an email address? Not safety, but human impatience. Many airports make you walk a certain distance to the baggage claim so that you don't get there earlier than your luggage does. People will walk 5 minutes without complaint, but whine like 2-year-olds if they have to stand around for 5 minutes. I believe you, but it's not working. I have never not beaten my luggage to the carousel by 5+ minutes. Working in the passenger rail industry has made me more of a misanthrope than I already was. My standard design guide for anything accessible by passengers and drivers, yes, they are just as bad. If they can't steal it, they'll break it. If they can't break it, they'll hurt themselves with it. Those little hammers for breaking the emergency glass are held there with a wire so you can't steal them. The wire is that short so you can't use it as a weapon. That ride on the train you're getting is likely 80% subsidized by taxes. That means you're literally paying less than a quarter what it actually costs to move your ass around. That tempered glass windscreen you just scratched your initials into is now a safety hazard and will cost a couple $1,000s to replace. Stuffing paper into the floor heater grate creates a fire hazard. Show some freaking respect and please refrain from vandalizing and damaging shit mostly paid for by people who don't ride the train just because you're bored or pissed off at the world. I did some work for the pilot training department, ground school of a major US airline based in Atlanta. They told us on the equipment we were providing to be sure that the buttons couldn't be removed and there weren't any gaps, because the pilots, who at this level were making probably $100,000 plus in the early 90s, would steal the buttons and fill any gaps with pieces of paper they didn't need. According to them, at one point there was a cockpit fire, because after a flight the pilots would shove their flight plan into a gap in the instrument panel on their plane. Moral is everyone, not just the general public, is shitty. As my father told me when I was a kid, just because someone earns a lot doesn't mean they're not an idiot. Try people riding in the old Pullman style cars removing the vent and shoving a pillow in, then refastening the cover. All because the AC was too high. A lot of go push buttons are just far enough away from whatever is going. Commercial finger pincher, industrial arm cutter offer, etc. So the operator can't reach the machine. Operators have solved the problem of not getting their fingers cut off by using a stick to push the button. I'm a mechanical engineer. My boss has literally told me, don't make things so someone won't hurt themselves or do it wrong. Make it so they physically can't. We add a lot of poke-yoke items to jigs and fixtures. Also light curtains, safety interlocks, door switches, machine guarding, etc. It does keep people safe, but when a machine is down and you have to work on it, it can be a real pain to actually make it move again when you need it to. Don't forget about the picture settings of newer Samsung, maybe others too. TVs tucked under expert settings. Yeah, because you gotta be a freaking expert to know how to adjust a TV. Can't tell if it's so the users feel smart, or because they know the users are actually that dumb. Probably because they know the users are dumb. Most of the time when a TV starts to wear out, overheat, or lose intensity, it's because someone turned the brightness up to max one time when there was a glare irritating them, and never switched it back. So they try to restrict the settings in order to have their products last longer. That whole thing when you get a new TV and it looks so much brighter, more vibrant, all that good stuff, it actually is, but your old one was probably just as nice when it first started out. Get curtains instead of turning up your TV's brightness and it'll last a lot longer. Anything over 50% is usually too bright, not to mention all the dynamic contrast BS that makes everything look like shite. That is the problem. Someone screws around with the settings. Even if they like it, if a friends or family member see it they will not like it and could be turned off of the brand. My buddy has a Samsung. It looks like shit. If you have a freestanding range, it came with an anti-tip over bracket that is supposed to be screwed to the floor and hold one of the range's rear feet to prevent it from tipping forward when a child climbs onto the open oven door. Almost no one installs these brackets, because they're a pitter, but they're included with every range, because in the event a child does get injured by tipping over the range, the liability goes to whoever didn't install the bracket, not the manufacturer. There's also the lid, door lock on clothes washing machines. It's there solely to keep people from opening the machine while it's running, reaching inside, getting tangled in the clothes and having their arm ripped off. So much of the engineering behind consumer products is about making things idiot-proof. The problem is that the idiots keep getting more idiotic. To quote my intro to engineering professor, the universe will take your attempts to make something idiot-proof as a personal insult, and will in turn make a better idiot. Industrial presses often have two buttons more than an arm range apart from each other to start them pressing. Guess why? I worked at a factory that had those and a guy committed suicide by putting his head in the press and touching both buttons. After that they moved the buttons back so it would be impossible to do that. Jesus, that's just horror show. I wonder if the guy was in the grip of some kind of irresistible compulsion. I wonder what could have been happening in his life. Normally stupid warning labels. We can't stop you from hurting yourself like a moron, but we can stop you from suing us. I always love seeing caution. Hot on something with an open flame. Someone out there had to be stupid enough to not figure that out on their own. I always love seeing caution. Hot on something with an open flame. Someone out there had to be stupid enough to not figure that out on their own. I had a friend in trade school that once touched a piece of metal he just welded to see if it was hot. In stress strain test machines there is a cage that covers samples that are about the size of 2 standard queen chess pieces stuck together. The cage is not there to protect the user from flying shards when the metal breaks. It is there to keep morons from grabbing the sample and slicing their hand apart when the sample breaks. And yes, this has happened. Mechanical engineer here. Worst invention ever are these freaking safety nozzles they put on new gas cans. You have to push this switch while pressing this lever, while pushing down on the nozzle, and half the time nothing comes out. These things never work properly and are a pain in the ass to use. I long for the good old days of just tipping the container and having gas come out. What is the purpose of these anyway? To force me to hold the 25-pound container on an angle with one hand, whilst simultaneously pulling back the foreskin of the spout with the other and getting gas all over my hand? Because then it's pretty damn effective. It's supposed to assist you in tipping the can over into the fuel tank without pouring gas all over the ground. Unfortunately, the design is overly complicated and you usually end up pouring gas all over the ground. I have a feeling that the good designs may be patent encumbered. I found a gas can at a garage sale that works perfectly. The best way I can describe it is a pistol grip with a trigger. Put the spout in the receptacle and pull the trigger. Works just fine. Sound symposies on small vehicles. We can't make that 4-cylinder sound like a V8 on its own, so we will just pipe very selective engine noises into the cabin to make it sound better. Or even better, do what BMW does and just play fake engine noises over your radio speakers. Unbelievably, Maserati offers a V6 diesel option for the Ghibli in Europe, and these play simulated engine noises into the cabin to make it sound less like a VW Passat taxicab. I hope someone figures out how to hack into one of these abominations and replace the vroom vroom sounds with a sitcom laughter track. I didn't know how much I wanted my accelerator to demonically intensify a laugh track. Newer operating systems are closed off to the general users because people would delete Windows or whatever and brick their computer. The System 32 virus is serious shit. Absolutely. If you see it, delete immediately before it fricks up your computer. Is this why Windows 10 updates every 5 seconds and never keeps my settings with each update? Newer cars with the push button start feature were initially designed so that if you needed to turn the engine off in an emergency, even if the car was in gear and moving, you could hold down the push button for several seconds. But people are dumb and panic, so instead of holding the button down, they would repeatedly stab at the button, like when they think hitting an elevator button or crosswalk button repeatedly will make it work faster. So car manufacturers had to set up the emergency power off feature to respond to either a long hold of the button or the repeated panic tapping of the button. That's actually pretty decent human factors engineering. I've seen a number of push button start cars left running because the driver completely forgot to turn it off before leaving. Maybe in a few model years the key will start chirping at you if you walk away from the car. My 2015 Ford Fusion will honk at you if the ignition is on and the proximity keys are removed from the vehicle for more than 5 seconds. It'll eventually turn off if the keys are not brought back and the vehicle is in park. If it's not in park, it doesn't shut down, because it is a system designed to fail into a safe mode so your key fob running out of battery mid-drive doesn't send you careening off the interstate. Oh, I am super late to the party, but damn did my company have some crazy ways of keeping people from killing themselves. So, my company has been around since 1914 and we have lots of stamping presses, hydraulic and automatic. In today's world we use a light curtain that would stop the machine as soon as something would cross its field. Easy, modern, and keeps OSHA at bay. Back in the day this technology wasn't available, so guess how we kept people out? We chained their arms. Yes, we had them in chains that would pull their arms back when the machine was completing its downstroke. We have an old picture of roughly 30 mechanical presses side by side with all of the machine operators chained to them. It just looked wrong. But yeah, thank God for technology. All red at an intersection. This to create a buffer for reaction times of running the red light, and people eager to leave right at a green light. A common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy contains peanuts warning on a package of peanuts. This is really a no exceptions kind of thing. Sure, a package of peanuts are obvious, but allowing this to be an exception to food labeling laws opens up everyone asking for an exception. It is far easier to disallow any exception, no matter how obvious it may be. This is where a lot of things that look dumb come from. If I give you an exemption, I have to give one to everyone else. Where I work, we have bucket trucks. The safety device is specifically designed so you need to use 2 hands to operate it. It's supposedly designed like this so you pay attention to where you're moving the boom. Problem is, the design makes it so it's tough to navigate looking backward over your shoulder. So little bit of the stupidity of human beings and the stupidity of engineers. My city has a machine in its waste processing plant solely to clean out shit like condoms and whatnot that people flush down. It's not even some crazy neat shit like the rest of the plant. Just water flowing through a set of spinning forks more or less. Aren't they putting artificial sounds into electric cars so pedestrians can hear them coming? That way I won't be assassinated in a parking lot by the deadly Prius. The Prius is silent under 5 miles per hour. That's going to be a really pathetic hit and run, then. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more videos every day.